Gerald 200, summer 2019. Hey, this is John, and I kind of delayed this video because I wanted to also include the how-to for critical thinking assignment number 2, and it's directly linked to what we've been doing in terms of our weekly assignments that has the readings and discussions. So what we're going to do in terms of reading discussions is going to be the caregivers and the role of caregivers. And then we're going to go into this second critical thinking assignment. So again, we've gone over all of these chronic diseases of aging, these communicable diseases. There, as I indicated in the previous lecture, there's a link between diabetes, heart disease, and Alzheimer's disease. It's a continuum. It's just really poor blood flow to the brain. And in addition to that, when you have the vascular disease that is caused by diabetes, it causes inflammation, and that it just is directly linked to Alzheimer's disease as well. And so that's why the statistics are so staggering, where 80% of all Alzheimer's patients suffer from diabetes. Alrighty, so that being said, I want to look at this kind of a crushing responsibility that you are going to experience as an individual, and that your generation is going to experience as a society, and that is caregiving. And it's the right thing to do. It's the responsible thing to do. There's a lot of kind of family culture that tells you it's the right thing to do. And however, there are limitations because there's so many old people coming down the pike, and there's fewer people to do the necessary work to support their needs. So what we're going to do is you can see it right here. When we have copied the first page of this paper, and it goes over the crazy transition. And we have another graph at the very end that explains everything of the Blackboard site. So see in 2010, okay, that there was a lot of caregivers. That was me, and I was doing this, for my mom. She was in her 90s, and it required a lot of effort on my part. And so my personal financial situation, my personal work situation was compromised by this cultural responsibility of caring for my mom. I just couldn't spend the hours at work because I live in Laguna Niguel, work is up in LA, and she lived out in Monterey Park, and so I was doing this triangulation. And I also had children, children that were in high school and middle school at that point in time. My wife, and I was sandwiched. I was caught between all this, and all I did was drive, and it was really, really difficult time. All right, that's caregiving, okay? And we see that as time marches on, okay, so this is really in 10.5 years, instead of having 7 potential caregivers for one person's need, it declines from 2 to 4 to 1. And that you're going to see this is large part because I am now becoming into that role. Then I'm going to need some services and support, and that's what this is all about here. As I get older, that's for sure, and you just march out so that puts you guys, in your 30s, and then we go 20 years later in your 50s, and you see that the numbers become even more staggering, okay, in terms of helping out. Sorry, let's go back to the PDF file. All right, so this article is pretty straightforward. It's going through what's going on in terms of this caregiver dilemma, and we see here that 2/3, about 60% of Americans believe that they can rely on their families. So certainly your parents are sitting there and they're doing the caregiving for you. Up to this point in time, they have created a support network so that you would succeed in high school, so that you succeed in college, so that you can launch and be really successful on your own. Okay, so that's a big part of their caregiving, and they were sandwiched, most likely, caregiving for their parents as well, who need the services. And this is something that they truly believe that you're going to be there for them. Okay, It's difficult though in a global economy, in a global work environment. There's a good chance that you and your brother or you and your sister, whatever it is, may be settle somewhere across the country or settle somewhere, some other country in the world. And back in the day when there were large families, that was okay. You had 6 kids in the family. If 3 were mobile, you had the other 3 you could depend on. But in today's world, oftentimes there's 1 or 2 children, and they leave the city. Okay, and then you have to then um, expand the coordination of the care. Okay, and so this is what this is all about. This reading assignment is what happens now when the personal model, the family caregiving model, is changing, and so we're going to be looking at a greater reliance of outside sources, and so there are popping up a number of companies. So this is a huge growth industry. So we talk about economics, okay? We talk about businesses in the class, and so this is a big section of part of this. So there's your own personal economics. So any time you spend caregiving is time you spend that you don't spend working, and so there is a financial hit to you as you fulfill this cultural responsibility of caregiving. Or if you can't do it, then you're going to hire somebody to do it. Either way, there's a personal financial hit. Okay. We also are going to look at the economic side of it in terms of our country and globally. If we're a compassionate society, then we're going to have to hire outside resources to help us. Okay. Alrighty. So this is kind of you should be getting used to this and I really want you to be able to look at these figures and go, oh, I get it. I totally get it. Okay. So this is, in my era. Okay. So I am 63. Okay. So I'm going to be turning 65 right around here. Okay. And my ability to do caregiving goes down, 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 down. Okay. Whether it's me or for my family members, I caregive for my neighbor next door who's in his 80s. Okay. So myself and my brothers, we were prime time. There were a bunch of us that could be caregivers. Okay, we see that as we get older, there's not the support network in your generation or say your parents' generation to support us. That's my dog whining. Come over here. Come here. Come here. Come over here. I want you guys to see Bella. Come on. Up, up, up. Come here. Come on. Come on. You gonna come up? No. All right. Come here. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on up. Oh. There's Bella. God, you are crazy. You want to see her? That's Bella. She doesn't like it. She doesn't like it at all. Can you say bye? Bye-bye. Okay, go ahead. All right. Okay, as we now continue on to this article, there's different ways of looking at things graphically. This is old hat for you. You guys are experts in this, looking at the increase in numbers of people 45 to 64 and on a percentile basis of the population. If you haven't figured it out already, guess what? There's going to be a lot more older people, okay? We scoot down here. Again, here's the projected people of 80. So this is the fastest growing segment of the population, okay? So this is the increase of these numbers, okay? So people that are 80 and above. In 2000, roughly 7% of the population you see going up and up and up and up and up. Okay, so that's what that's all about. So you can read up on this. As we scroll down here, this is the front page, and then we've also included this other graphic that is a reiteration, and it just shows you again the impact that's happening here in terms of the number of caregivers versus person needing care. Okay. And so the number of caregivers, this was peaking during my age group when I was available, and now it's going down, 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 and that's a huge issue for you guys. All right. So then we go in here, and this is all about the cultural differences, okay, of caregiving patterns. And so when you are looking at your responsibility, you should know what culture you are from and what the expectations are, and this is what this is all about right here. how American culture changes things, okay? And another thing to think about on the supply side, if you're a businessman and you get into this industry, that you create an environment that is culturally attractive so that you can increase your clientele. So it's a way to market this. So yeah, this is all something for you to think about right here. All right, so this was taken from this. So I'm going to get into the next segment of the course, which is the critical thinking. So we're right up in here right now, so we're going to go to critical thinking assignment. Okay, and so that's CT1, which you guys did amazing. Again, there's a rubric for grading. Okay, and there's an example of the graph. Here is CT2. Okay, so we, these are the long-term range learning objectives. Okay, this is the actual assignment that you need to take a look at. Okay, so there's a number of aspects of this patient. So you are actually a clinician. Okay. And you've just met your patient. His name is Edward, okay? And he's forgetful, wanders outside his home. He's not paying his bills, poor hygiene. He has Alzheimer's disease, okay? All right, so big caregiving problems, okay? He can no longer live alone. He has a long history of type 2 diabetes. So you're going to, in your discussion with the family, you're going to have to discuss this with them, okay? How it is linked, okay? And I already talked about that before. Diabetes causes vascular problems, inflammation causes a breakdown in the blood-brain barrier, and then this causes inflammatory proteins, kind of like you get when you have a mosquito bite. That happens in the brain, and it causes death to the brain cells. Okay. Alrighty. You should include charts and graphs and figures. And what we want you to do in that is to link diabetes and Alzheimer's disease. Again, you're going to find out that 80% of Alzheimer's patients have diabetes. Okay. You're going to explain this to the family right here. Okay. In your discussion, then you come over here. I want you to differentiate between type 1 diabetes. This is juvenile onset. It's an autoimmune disease, okay? And this is where the person's own immune system in late teens will attack their pancreas so they no longer produce insulin. These are insulin-dependent diabetics. They have to inject insulin. Type 2 diabetes is adult onset, and it has to do with a lot with genetics interacting with the environment, okay, and the environment being the kind of diet the person has and the inherent lack of exercise, okay. It comes down to the insulin receptors and how sensitive they are to the insulin that's released by the pancreas. If you are obese, there are factors released by the fat cells that reduce the sensitivity of your insulin receptors. These factors include fatty acids and also those very same inflammation markers that I was talking about reduce the sensitivity of the insulin receptor. If insulin's not working, blood sugar gets high, and that causes major problems in your vasculature, as does all the inflammatory proteins that leads to diabetic vascular disease, heart disease, diabetics-related stroke. Okay, so I want you to link all this together again. And you can just kind of listen to what I said and do a little Googling, all right? All right, how do we diagnose Alzheimer's disease? There's no blood test. There are expensive imaging tests that only work when Alzheimer's disease is very progressed and you see big holes in the brain, okay? The only thing that we have available to us right now is what's called a psychological battery of questions. It's called the Mini Mental Status Exam, MESE, okay? And this is what neurologists, psychiatrists, and psychologists use to diagnose somebody having a cognitive impairment that is caused by dementia. We won't know exactly what form of dementia is. There's many different causes, Alzheimer's being the most common, until the person dies, okay? Diabetes, how do you diagnose that? You diagnose that with a blood test, all right? So the old standard was the fasting blood glucose levels, okay? Should be below 100. You have the glucose challenge test, okay, where you fast and then you give a person a set amount of glucose and you And then you see how quickly the glucose is cleared from the blood within 2 hours. And more recently, we're looking about kind of a chronic measure that is much more reliable, and that's the hemoglobin A1C test. And what that is a measure of, hemoglobin is a protein in your blood, and if you have chronically high levels of glucose floating around the blood, the glucose will candy coat that hemoglobin protein, and so we get a real chronic measure. And so that's what you hear the HbA1c test all about. How are you going to treat Alzheimer's disease? There's not much out there. Exercise, cognition. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to try and cognitively challenge people, people that are well-read, have the slower, lower incidence and slower progression. Better diet. There are some drugs that are available. Okay, cognitive enhancing drugs that don't work that well. One's called an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor, and the other one slightly blocks glutamate. Okay, it's called memantine. So you guys can look those up. 2 categories of drugs don't work very well. Diabetes, how are you going to treat this? Okay, you're going to give the person instructions on exercise, on diet. Okay, if they're a type 2 diabetic, there are a number of drugs out there that will enhance insulin release. There are some drugs out there that will help get rid of the sugar out of your kidneys. Okay, you just need to kind of look these up. And then in the last case, when type 2 diabetes gets really, really progressive and is at the end stage, these diabetics then will also use insulin injections. The prognosis for Alzheimer's disease and diabetes, this is manageable. Unfortunately, the prognosis is not great for this. Okay, alrighty. Follow these directions, you're going to do just fine. Okay, I think this is important. Okay, remember, when you look at the statistics that if you look over the age of 65, about 1 out of 8 people have Alzheimer's disease. If we look at it at age 85 and older, which a lot of us are going to be, 1 out of every 3. So this is a real deal. It's a chronic disease. It's expensive. It's psychologically, as a caregiver, it's debilitating, okay? And it affects your well-being in terms of your living with your spouse and your kids, okay? So, awesome, and hopefully this helps you with your CT assignment, and I look forward to reading what you guys come up with.